Buyers are negotiating $30, $50, even $100,000 off asking prices. And sellers that haven't adjusted, they're just sitting on the market. Cape Coral's housing market is not just cooling down, guys, it is shifting. And if you're not in the know, you could be missing out on a huge opportunity or possibly making the wrong move.
So let's break down what's really happening in the Cape Coral housing market for Q1. Hi, Doug and Lona Lugers here, real estate broker and realtor here in the Cape Coral real estate market. I'm also a boat captain and we're lifestyle ambassadors for the last 20 years.
Yeah, today, guys, we're going to go over Q1 stats. We're going to look at year-over-year comparisons and talk about what type of homes are still selling in today's market.
We're also going to talk about the truth when it comes to buyer negotiations, and we're going to give tips for buyers and sellers on how to sell in this real estate market. If you want to learn all there is to know about living in Southwest Florida, don't forget to hit that like button, that subscribe button, and hit that bell icon, and you'll be notified whenever we put out new content.
So let's talk about where we landed for Q1 of 2025.
Yes, the median sales price for Cape Coral came in at $375,000, which is 6.2% less than when it was the first quarter of 2024. So sales prices came down a little bit. And then closed sales came in at 1,259 total closed, which is 5.9% less than it was the first quarter of 2024. And then how many active listings were on the market at the end of the first quarter? That's what we're looking at now when we talk about new listings. And there were 3,186 active listings on the market this year. And if you compare that to last year, it's 2.7% higher than it was last year. I kind of thought that number would be a little bit higher.
Of course.
Yeah, but it actually is higher when you go a little bit further back. Here's what I mean. Let's start with closed sales. If you look at closed sales a little bit further, you can see that we have 1,259, as I said, the first quarter this year. If you compare that to the peak quarter, which was 2022, there were 1,815 closed sales, and now we have 1,259. That's quite a bit of a drop off there for, quarter versus quarter. But what's interesting is if you go all the way back to 2019, we consider that
a normal, healthy market.
Yeah, pre-COVID, right?
Yeah.
There were 1,235 closed sales. So.
Oh, very close.
Yeah, so pretty much almost par for the course there. If we look at median sales prices and go back in history, this is where it gets really interesting to me, is, as I said, the first quarter was $375,000. If you compare that to when the median sales price was at its peak, the peak quarter was 2022, and median sales prices ended up at $404,000. And then if you go a little bit further back, median sales prices in 2019 were $230,000.
Wow.
Right? So if you compare the $230,000 to when the peak was in 2022, that's a 43% increase in prices. So what we've been saying is that we need an adjustment, kind of come back to more of a normal market, right?
Yeah.
We're expecting whenever the pendulum goes one way, as far as it goes one way, it has to come back equally.
Swings
right?
back,
Basically.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we're somewhere between pre-COVID normal market and a post-COVID correction here.
Exactly.
Okay, so now we're going to dive a little bit deeper and we're going to talk about year-over-year historical comparisons. And that is an indicator, guys, of whether the market's doing good or whether the market's doing bad.
Right. So we're going to get a little bit more granular. And to do that, we're going to focus more on a monthly standpoint. So we're going to compare March to the previous Marches. And that'll enable us to talk about some other stats that you need to know, like days on market, list versus sales price ratio, things like that. So let's just jump right in. Closed sales March to March, right?
Okay.
That's the most recent numbers too. That's another positive about it is the most recent. So closed sales for March was 593 sales, March 2025. And if you compare that to the peak March, which was March of 2021, there were 769 closed sales, which represents a 23% drop in closed sales if you compare March of 2025 to March of 2021. And then if you go all the way back to 2019, closed sales was 530 closed sales. So
not too far off, a little higher than March of 2019.
Yep. So that takes us to median sales price. From a March standpoint, we ended up at $369,000. The peak March for the median sales price was March of 2022 when it was 415,000. And that means that prices have come down from the peak March 11.1%. Now, it's really interesting again. Go back to 2019. We keep saying that was the normal market. Normal market, March of 2019 was 232,950 was the median sales price. So we're still where we ended up, 37% higher than we were in 2019. 37%.
Wow.
All right, so just kind of put that in perspective for you. Now, let's talk about the percent of list price received, which is the percent of list price received. It's the average sales price basically divided by the final sales price. So homes are selling at 96.6% as of March, right? So
96.6% of the asking price.
yes. So that's what sellers could expect to get on average. If you compare that to the peak, which was the March of 2022, sellers were getting 100.7%.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. But what's normal? Well, to find normal, again, go back to 2019, and it was the sellers could expect to get around 97%. So normally what we see is that 96 to 97% is a normal market.
We're right there.
Right. You're probably hearing on all the media that it's definitely a buyer's market right now, right? Well, it is. And to kind of show you that, we go to the next stat, which is percent of the original price received. And here's why this is important. This is based on the price that sellers originally listed their home at.
Okay.
And
not any adjusted prices like price decreases to move the listing.
Exactly. Because what we see is when homes are overpriced, they have to come down to a certain point to where buyers finally bite. Right?
Yeah, they have to get within range of what the true price is.
Yeah, exactly. So this is where it's crazy. Sellers can expect to get 91.1% of their original asking price if they don't list it right out of the gate.
Okay.
Quite a bit lower than that 96%, right? 91% of their original asking price. This is definitely a tale of what's happening in the real estate market. Now, the peak was March 2022 when they were getting 100.5%. So there's a 9% difference.
That's substantial.
Yeah. And if you compare it to March of 2019, even then, when the normal market, sellers were getting 94.3% of their original asking price on average. So, like as of March of this year, we're getting 3% less. Sellers are getting 3% less than what they did in the normal market 2019. That's showing that the market has softened quite a bit, and it's tilted back in favor of buyers here in Cape Coral.
Yeah, guys, this isn't 2008. This is a return to fundamentals. And if you're buying or selling a home based on fantasy comps, you're going to lose. You're going to lose out.
Absolutely. So let's talk about list to close days. How long does it take from the time of listing till they actually close on the properties that actually do sell?
Okay.
And the average was 97 days, which is pretty much...
That's not bad.
No, and it's pretty much what it was March of last year. And as you can see, looking at this chart, all but COVID, that's what the average is. I mean, that's a good average. That's what we're used to seeing even back in the 2019 we saw.
Okay.
Now, active inventory, the amount of listings on the market at the end of March. Take a look at that. It was 3,966 active listings. And if you compare that to March of 2021, there were 699 active listings.
Wow. We had no inventory
No
then.
inventory. Do you know what that represents? An 82.4% increase. An 82.4% increase in inventory over when it was the lowest.
Those numbers are shocking.
Yeah.
We just couldn't keep homes on the market.
Okay, let's put it in perspective. Go back to the March of 2019. There were 2,816 active listings at that time. So if you compare the normal market to what we are now, 3,966, we have 30% more listings than what we did in 2019 when we had a normal market. So that's why prices are coming down, why we're seeing so many price reductions, right? There's a lot more active inventory.
Yeah. So sellers, probably have a little bit of false expectations still because times were so good during COVID and you were pretty much naming your price then as a seller.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's a couple more stats interesting here. Unsold listings. This represents how many listings expired, withdrawn, or canceled in the month of March. And there were 467 listings that were withdrawn, canceled, or expired, which is 35% more than March of 2024 when there were 346 canceled listings, expired listings, etc. So there's a lot more listings not selling now than there was in that, even versus last year, right? Quite a bit more. You got a lot more people who are like, oh shoot, I missed it. I missed my chance to get that highest price, and now they're like taking their homes off the market. They're realizing their prices are too high. They're shooting for those 2019 numbers, right?
And that's our peak season too. So, they list for a certain time period during that peak season, but if they miss the window by overpricing it and it didn't sell, they'll pull it back off the market for summer and wait for those winter months to roll around again when all the snowbirds are back in town.
Yeah, and if you compare that to 2019, March, there was 264 canceled listings. So we're almost double of listings that got canceled, expired, etc. Now that brings home the next point, which is supply of inventory. Everybody wants to know, are you in a buyer or seller's market? I think pretty much everybody knows we're in a buyer's market, but they don't know to what extent. A lot of times when they're interviewing real estate agents out there. And so right now we're sitting at 6.7 months. That's actually less than what it was last month or previous months of this year. It's come down. And part of the reason it's come down is because so many of those listings canceled, expired, or what have you.
Sure.
Right?
So anything over 6 months is considered a buyer's market.
Absolutely. So yeah, sitting at 6.7 months. Now what will we see the rest of the year? Time will only tell, but we'll keep you updated on those numbers.
Okay, so that reminds me of a recent buyer that we worked with who really fell in love with the Gulf Access home, had his heart set on a particular home. And when we ran the comps, this thing was just way overpriced. Do you remember by how much, Doug?
I want to say like 65, 75,000 somewhere.
At least, yeah. And so we reached out to the agent to find out, kind of what the seller's thought process was in going in with that pricing. And she basically told us that hers was worth more than the comps that we provided because it had a 3-car garage.
Right.
And so we asked her to send over some numbers and just kind of show us like where they came up with the list price. Because again, our buyer was persistent. He really was interested in pursuing this home.
Even though we told him it's overpriced and
way
it's
overpriced.
Difficult to get it at a decent price below, what it's actually worth.
Because while he did love it, he still wanted to negotiate and make a smart buy, especially in the market, watching it still go down yet, right?
Exactly.
And so anyway, we asked her to send over comps, and when we got them, they just were not comparable to the property at all. They were very much out of line. And so guys, the whole point of this is that you really want to make sure that you're working with the right agent that knows the market and knows how to pull the right numbers, because that house is still sitting today. When it expires, that seller is not going to be very happy with that agent for giving them false expectations.
Yeah. If you watched or follow our channel, you probably already know that I'm a former appraiser. And what I unfortunately see a lot is agents just don't have the experience to pull comps, to do adjustments. And when the market makes a turn like it is right now, it becomes even more important.
Critical.
Yeah, a few years ago, you didn't have to be that good at pulling numbers. You could just put any list price.
Sellers could make up a price and people would pay it.
If you're anywhere in the ballpark, you would get your home sold, right? Well, we're not there anymore. And so the agents have to know how to get houses priced right to get them sold. And what we're seeing is there's a lot of them that don't, and that's also contributing to a lot of houses staying on the market right now. And it also contributes to that number that we shared, the expired, canceled,
and withdrawn.
Yeah, that high number, that's why. That's a big reason why.
Huge indicator. Okay, and if you're a buyer Time is on your side, but you need to be decisive if the deal's right.
That's right. You have to be decisive. The best deals are still flying off the shelves. We still had 600 closings last month. You're not the only buyer in town, so be ready to go. And in order to be ready to go, you got to have your financing ready to go. If you're getting financing, like, you have to be pre-approved, ready to rock and roll. Cash buyers, you need to have your proof of funds ready to go. And you need to be flexible too. We found that the best buyers that get the best deals are the most flexible when it comes to terms of the deal.
Sure, yes. Along with, you need to consider inspection leverage, seller concessions, and list to sell date to really structure a smart offer in today's market.
Absolutely. You don't have to overpay, but you can't underplay, that's for sure. A well-prepped buyer is getting the best deals right now.
Absolutely.
So if you're not sure what this market means for your home, your neighborhood, or your next move, that's what we're here for.
That's right. We've helped dozens of buyers and sellers navigate this market and this shift, and we can help you too.
So as a reminder, download that Cape Coral boating map that we have down below in the description, and it'll help you learn all there is to know about boating times and things like that. You can also check out our Real Talk with Dougie podcast to learn how the mortgage market is changing, how the insurance market's changing right now. Learn all about that. But more importantly, call us, text us, DM us anytime. We're real people. We're not robots.
And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our page and hit that bell, guys, to get updates on everything living in 239.
See you next time.
See you in paradise.